you ever had a neighbor lose their mind over your lawn? I was 24, living in my very first place on my own, a little townhouse I rented while putting myself through college. This was the late 80s, back when you could actually afford a whole house on a student's budget. I didn't have much money to spare, but I was making it work. The townhouse was one of those row units connected on both sides. On my southern side was a neighbor I got along fine with. We'd nod, say hello, nothing more. On the other side, though, was Bob, and Bob had a problem with me from day one. Every time we crossed paths, I'd try to be polite. Hi, good morning, but he'd ignore me, scowl, or just turn away. I didn't push it. Some people are just miserable by nature. Now, here's where it all started. Most of the neighborhood treated their lawns like sacred ground. They'd dump chemicals and weed killers every spring, chasing that picture-perfect carpet of green. But me, I couldn't afford that nonsense. And even if I could, I wasn't about to poison the ground just to impress the neighbors. I liked the natural look. Grass mixed with crabgrass, clover, and yes, some dandelions. Bob didn't like that one bit. One day, he stormed over, yelling about my lawn, said it didn't fit the neighborhood, said I had no self-respect. He actually told me my dandelions were dragging down property values. At first, I tried to be polite, explaining I couldn't afford weed killers and didn't want to use them anyway. But Bob just kept ramping up every time he saw me. And then he started calling me poor white trash. That's when it went from annoying to personal. One afternoon, I was pulling into my driveway with a couple friends from school. We piled out of the car, laughing, carrying our books, when Bob suddenly burst out of his house. At the top of his lungs, he screamed, "Get rid of those effing dandelions!" My friends froze, wide-eyed, and Bob, realizing he had an audience, doubled down. He looked straight at my friends and said, "Did you know your buddy is an embarrassment to the neighborhood? How's it feel to be friends with white trash?" That was the moment I snapped. I told him to shut up, to mind his own business, and that was that. Or so I thought. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find a city bylaw officer. Bob had filed an official complaint claiming my yard was full of noxious weeds. The officer asked if he could take a look. Since the only way to my backyard was through the house, I let him in and even offered him a drink. It was a hot day, and he gratefully accepted. We stepped into the backyard, and sure enough, the place was dotted with white and yellow dandelions. The officer sighed. He told me immediately that my yard was nowhere near a problem. I already knew that. I'd checked the city's list of actual noxious weeds long ago, just in case. Dandelions weren't on it. He apologized for wasting my time, and then, to my delight, marched over next door to Bob's place. I stood at my front door and listened as the officer chewed Bob out. Bob sputtered, yelling that he and his wife couldn't even sit outside because of my lawn. The officer told him to stop harassing me and left, and that's when I got an idea. I knew Bob loved sitting out on his back deck in the afternoons, so the next time I saw him out there, I walked calmly into my backyard, bent down, and gathered a bouquet of white-topped dandelions, seed heads ready to blow. I walked right up to the fence, locked eyes with him, and blew thousands of seeds straight into his yard. The wind carried them beautifully. His lawn was sprinkled like snow in seconds. Bob went red-faced, yelling and sputtering, but I just smiled and said, "What's the matter, Bob? I'm just doing what you asked. I'm getting rid of my dandelions." Every single time I saw him out on his deck after that, I'd go outside, grab a few more dandelions, and send their seeds drifting into his yard, day after day, week after week, until eventually, dandelion season ended. Bob never learned his lesson. He stayed a bully and a miserable neighbor, always finding new things to complain about. But for those few glorious weeks, I had the perfect revenge, using nothing but the wind, a few flowers, and his own anger against him.